So this is the fourth video lecture on the topic of sex and gender. In the last video, I was talking about gender stratification and different elements of gender stratification. This is more of the same, except it focused more specifically on women in politics and women in reproductive legislation. And as I suggested in the last recording, that the relationship between both of these is that most of the people writing the legislation are male, yet there's an abundance of legislation written that affects only a woman's reproductive bodies and reproductive capacities, not a man's. And so that raises some interesting questions. A couple phrases here that are important is this notion of the personal is political, and I think there might be a discussion question or a quiz question. What exactly does that mean? And what that means is that there are personal decisions that are being limited or being decided in the political arena, and things that should be private. And then I'm pretty sure this video is still available. I think I asked you a discussion question about the significance. This slide over here is simply some of the explanations why there are fewer women in political office, and there's various theories some of them include, like, women get distracted by their families, women are less likely to be trusted, things like this. And then the question is, why is that so? This question down here, most powerful woman in American politics, I've been asking that question to classes for a long time. And of course, at one point, that most powerful person was Nancy Pelosi. Sometimes students would assume it was Hillary Clinton. That was not true. Hillary never had more power than Nancy Pelosi when she was the third, but now we have Kamala Harris, which is the second highest office in the land. The key is that some of the other positions held by women were not elected, they were appointed, like Secretary of State. That's an appointed position, that's not an elected position. And we have only had one female hold the position of vice president. We have had one. Two was Geraldine Ferraro, I believe. She was also a candidate for vice president, but only one candidate for president was ever female. Patriarchy. Okay, so the significance here is know what that means, and a couple of the theories. I don't know if you recognize this picture. I think it's not Leave It to Beaver, it's Father Knows Best. Right, so patriarchy is defined as a political philosophy or a belief of male domination or male control. So if you take that word apart, you have like the patriarchal referring to father. It's a structure, it's an organizational structure of male domination. And there's been a couple different theories as to where patriarchy came to be. One, this one right here, the origins of, is the assumption is that because because of their relationship to reproduction, and because they would get big and couldn't run and couldn't fight in wars, that she was limited to the home, right? She was limited to the village, and she had to stay near the tent. She had to stay near the garden, stay near the children. Men, on the other hand, they went out into the world of work, or into the world, and they hunted the bison, and they hunted all the wild animals, and they came in contact with other groups, and so they grew up to be more worldly. You fast forward, men go out into the workforce, women stay home, and that would be a evolutionary explanation of patriarchy, is that it's grounded in women's limited ability to move around because she got pregnant and had to nurse the babies. Another observation is that women historically have been used as the spoils of war, or sort of the prizes. That even today, one of the ways that a warrior or an enemy will degrade his other male enemy is by taking his women or raping his women. That women have been throughout human history regarded as sort of the spoils, right? The prize of war. You would capture the women and children. And this actually is also grounded in sort of the philosophy, the role of reproduction, because if you want your people group, to rise up and sort of dominate, you have to have a lot of babies, and you have to have women in order to have a lot of babies. Well, a counter or a sociological question is, if women are so valuable that you steal them, maybe if we elevated them in the first place, right? Okay. So a couple different origins there. Oh, and then another theory says is that because women couldn't participate in hand-to-hand combat, that they couldn't rise to social status of like warrior or victor, things like this. Okay, in everyday life. But now this is really what sociologists are interested in, right? Is how does patriarchy play out in everyday life? Well, we see this phenomena called gender tracking, and that's when certain occupations are encouraged for boys and other occupations. Here at the tech college, you see a lot of gender tracking, right? You see the girls are more likely to be in nursing and childcare, and you see the boys are more likely to be in the automotive and the construction and the childcare trades, earn a whole lot less money compared to the male-dominated other occupations. There are a handful of examples of women entering those male-dominated occupations. I've heard some pretty horrific stories from other places that I've taught about how women get treated differently. When there's a study group, they are expected to bring the food, or they are explicitly excluded altogether, or they have to deal with kind of sexual innuendo that makes it uncomfortable for them, and they may even be afraid to be around their classmates, right? So it makes it difficult for women to gain access into some of those male-dominated occupations. At the same time, when you have men in female-dominated occupations, they're usually regarded with great regard and great reverence. At another school I taught at, you would see that when a man would enter the nursing program, he would become like the president of their class, right? That doesn't happen when a woman enters in the auto tech trade. She doesn't become the president of her class. What's this one? Healthcare. There's just been an abundance of observations about how so much healthcare research is done on men, not on women. A great example of that is heart disease. Heart disease is the number one killer for women in my age group. I'm 50 years old, and that has to do with the symptoms are different for women than they are for men. But because most of the research has been done on men, the symptoms of women having a heart attack are not recognized because they're not exactly the same as for men. Testosterone bonus and childcare penalty. This is simply a phenomena that when men have kids, this is especially true for politicians, when a male politician has a family and children, he is regarded as more trustworthy and a better choice. When a woman politician has children and a family, she's regarded as less reliable, that she will be distracted by her kids. We don't assume men will be distracted by their family and their children, partly because childcare and family life is a female gender role, right? And so if he is conforming to his traditional gender role, he won't be distracted by his family. If she is conforming by her traditional gender role, she will be distracted by her family. Conversation, a great example is who interrupts who. We see this in the classroom, that men are way more likely to interrupt a female while she's talking than a female is likely to interrupt a male. There are lots more terminology, lots more uses of phrases that are derogatory to female ways of being than male ways of being. Again, the classic example is when one man is trying to insult another man, he refers to a female body part to do so. And then devaluation of all things feminine. I'm pretty sure I still have this little video available to you. And it's just the general cultural way of devaluing feminine ways of being, and using, the feminine in terms of humor and sports, all those things I've already been talking about, right? Okay, what's this? This is just more of the same thing. It's more terms. This one specifically about the implications of gender and work. There's a phenomenon called labor market segmentation, which says that certain tasks, certain jobs are predominantly done by women, other tasks are predominantly done by men. And some of this would make sense if it was tied to body, but not all of it is necessary. Doctors, for one thing, that didn't need to be tied to body, right? And those pink and those jobs assigned to women are typically paid less. Pink collar jobs are just examples of jobs that are typically assigned women. Things like server, or we call them waitresses, nurse, right? Those kinds of things. The glass escalator and the glass ceiling, we've already talked about that. That's the idea that when men are in female dominated occupation, they ride the escalator and they ride to the top very quickly. When women are in male dominated occupations, they can see the glass ceiling, they can see it, but they can't break through it, right? If you saw, I don't know why you would have, but if you saw like Hillary Clinton's acceptance speech, she used that metaphor of the glass ceiling. There was this image of things shattering, right? That's what that's about. The gender pay gap is what I've already talked about. Is that what this one is? Gender pay gap is the economic statistic that women are earning about 85 cents, I think it is, for every dollar. Pay equity is a term for equal pay, equal work, that when I'm doing a job that requires the same amount, a woman does a job that requires the same amount of skill as a man, they should be paid the same. And there are no laws that say they must be paid the same. There are no laws that say that. And that's sort of what comparable worth is. And I will stop right here. And when I come back, I will pick up some more illustrations of gender stratification.